viewers, you've just had a great admissions session with my co-host John, talking about plotting your path to business school, how you can successfully apply to the world's top business schools. The balance here, of course, is that we start with that whole admissions process, and then we think about the experience at business school, and embedded in that, of course, is the careers experience and the outcomes that we're enjoying. I'm just musing from our discussion before we went live of where do you go from 100%? And I'm going to turn to Hoyt. In fact, let me introduce all of our panel, because we've got career superstars with us for the next 50 minutes. Hoyten is a Senior Director of Coaching and Programming for the Career Management Group at Berkeley Haas. You can tell with that bridge hidden behind him. Abigail Keese is back with us. Abigail is the Assistant Dean of Career Development at the Yale School of Management. Ed Bernier, Assistant Dean of the Career Management Center at the Fuqua School at Duke. And then Heather Byrne, who is the Managing Director of Career Development Office at the Ross School at the University of Michigan. So we've actually got a wonderful nationwide spread, and finding out how the class of 22 has been getting on and what things are looking at. But Hoyt, just back to 100%, you've had a record-breaking year. Tell us a little bit about what you've seen for those students that graduated a few months ago.
Yeah, so I think number one, companies were hungry for talent. I think everyone's heard about the Great Resignation. And so companies trying to gobble up talent. Students had a lot of choices. They could spend a little bit more time looking at those choices. But there was always, what was really interesting during this time, there's always a little sense of urgency, even though you're hearing great news, but you listen to the news and the economy is, is predicting this tanking. So it was kind of like this kind of push-pull. Yes, I'm seeing opportunities, yet the environment is saying, get a job now, right? So I think we had a lot of students. We actually, we don't have our final numbers yet, but we did 3 years, not 3 years, but 3 months out, we hit really good numbers we haven't hit before in terms of students, number of students employed. So that's been good. I think in terms of like, what's it like? A lot of times what we do is we shift a little bit to say, how do we support you in your first job? And so an emphasis on that now that you've got this new gig and you're making this transition, and hopefully you're seeing the world and yourself in the world a little bit differently with the MBA. It's like, how do we help you survive that first role? Because there's a lot of data out there that actually says that most students' first job out of the MBA program is still an experiment for them, still a test. And so how do we support you in that success and then make career decisions afterwards?
Heather, you were talking about earlier and earlier. Now, whether that's for internships in the summer or planning for graduation, is that part of this sort of sense of urgency? And both your team at Ross, but then candidates themselves really need to be prepared to do well in what is a very strong job market at the moment?
Yes, I think we start to prepare students as soon as they decide to come here, because I think that's an important thing, is the readiness. And so we work with students we have an interactive online course that they take, and we do workshops and panels before they start school. They have a good draft of their resume. So, and then once they get here, we have programming and these great small groups that they work in called our functional accountability career teams to get them ready. So, I think like Hoyt alluded to, students stay in that first job for a short time. So this is all an iterative process, and our goal is to help you have career search skills for life. And I actually think it helps students relieve some of that stress when they know that first post-MBA job is not the dream job. It's going to be maybe an 18-month, 20-month journey. And so, so our prep starts early to make sure that why did you come back to school? I think that's such a focus, and you kind of focus on this role specifically that you want, but you're not really clear why. You're not sure about all those other roles. You're not sure what the motivations are behind it, the values. So we put a lot of energy and time to make sure that you understand those, and then wrap that around with a lot of support while you're here to make sure that you're ready for the recruiting that, yes, as we talked about, is starting earlier and earlier, which is why we make sure you have a good draft of your resume before school even starts, to get you ready for all the presentations and everything that seem to also be starting sooner and sooner. But that's our goal, is to make sure that you're ready to show up as your best self, talk about your transferable skills, and get you ready to get going.
Right. Our viewers have just, I suppose, been listening to your colleagues from admissions, talk about, well, where does business school fit in your next steps of personal professional development? Where might you see yourself post MBA? Ed, how does that sit with, they then show up and you're sitting down with them and providing an extraordinary level of personal guidance, mentoring. They said, well, I told the school I wanted to do this after the MBA. Do you sort of just lay all of that flat and say, well, let's explore together?
Yeah, the beauty of what's been going on the past few years is the number of options that students have is mind-boggling, and it's almost paralyzing sometimes. So on one hand, we'll have a student that arrives and says, and based on these things that I've done before, what do I do next? What's the assessment I need to take that's going to tell me exactly what I should be doing next? So it's very intimidating to figure that out. Other students are very, very fixed on something before they even get to business school. So a lot of the things that we work with students on, yes, we're going to expose them to choices. We'll show them the menu. Yes, we'll show them where their counterparts and their classmates went the years before them. So this is all like a choice sharing exercise. But I would say the bulk of our work is around how we can take each student to be as amazing as they can be as they're showing up to make these choices with particular employers. So what I tell students a lot is making a choice is one of the true few liberties that all of us have all the time. And that can be a very intimidating thing. I try to help them understand what those choices are, but I'd say the bulk of our time is, I think they're amazing coming in. I think we can do some things with students to make them even more amazing coming out. And that's the part that I'm actively trying to accelerate, to literally make them as awesome as possible when they're engaging with any of these organizations.
Right. Abigail, how do we bring together, Hoyt's remark, it's a very strong market, you're sort of seeing record numbers. And then, Heather pointing out that first position is often a stepping stone to, the longer term careers that you're building. So career reports, which must take your team an enormous amount of time to put together. What do they miss, or sort of just capturing the nuance of, here are the numbers of people that have found places, but, here are the satisfaction levels, or, where people are really now orienting towards the sort of career paths that they wanted?
I love this question, and I could go on and on, but I will try to contain myself. I think they miss a lot. I think that they give a snapshot of what people are choosing first. We really focus on giving students the basis for ongoing career management. And we really look at it from the beginning as a lifelong journey that you're on. And we're helping you with this first phase of it. And we also work with alumni very similar ways as they continue and often come back to us. I also think it's challenging. I think it's really hard for students to not look at the high salaries and see what industries or employers they're associated with, and to then still explore and focus on all of the other options. I think what those employment reports miss that's most important to me is there are two things. One is none of that says actually the quality of life or how much someone's actually thriving in those roles or how long they will stay in those roles. And what those roles will then lead to. And sometimes, the student who takes a job for a startup that's not paying very much, that's going to be on, the sort of lower end of most MBA ranges and other things, in 5 years is running the latest, coolest organization that everyone in the world has heard of. And you can't measure that in the employment report. And there are so many other examples in between. Sometimes there are students who take what they think are, for lots of different choices, they think are companies that are not as snazzy or flashy, that don't really cause attention. And they can be amazingly successful and make such a difference and really become leaders in those organizations. And they sometimes do stay with them, or they move to other organizations that are similar. And none of that is reflected in an employment report. It only shows not just, a first job, but really what are the first choices. And I also think there are many students who really choose a lot of those amazingly well-known, well-paying MBA employers for what I would call a great reason. There are others who choose them for another great reason, which is that, they definitely are attracted to the high salaries. And for some students, getting that education that they will get at those employers and making a lot those first few years gives them the freedom to keep exploring throughout their career and to keep moving and to keep expanding. So I don't think there's a right or wrong about the choices students make, but I don't think you see any of that and any of that motivation and really how students are thinking about it when you just look at an employment report.
Right. Right. No, that's a great place for us to start. Hoyt, if you did know what Jerome Powell and the Fed were going to announce in terms of interest rates in the months to come, you might be living on some private island somewhere. But
Yes.
Crystal ball, as you look at this year, tech, consulting, finance, of course, have always been such strong stalwarts. But are you seeing then any additional sectors, healthcare, supply chain areas that have really emerged in recent years?
Yeah, I think one of the things, especially as we head towards turbulent times, one of the things that we focus on is that even in turbulent times, all companies hire. The news, and we overgeneralize, is like, Facebook is not hiring freeze. You hear it. So then that goes down the phone call line and it becomes like, no tech company's hiring, every tech company's freezing. It's catastrophizing. But in tough times, you really have to get into the weeds, because if you look at the data, if you look at how companies behaved in past recessions, you actually have all the clues you need to know to figure out where to retarget. When you think about it, like in tough times, what I see a lot of times is the rise of software as a service companies. Because in tough times, companies are always looking for tools to make them better and more efficient. So they'll invest in that. So those companies will still have revenue, right? Depending on the type of recession, consumer spending may crater. So great, you avoid those. So I'm seeing a lot of companies that help other companies become better. They seem to have a lot more resiliency and stick around, and they seem to have a lot more promise. You look at companies like Snowflake, who 5 years ago was this kind of budding thing, and now it's a big deal, big player in the industry. So those are the kind of things we kind of look out for in terms on how I see the market moving forward, and really helping students target during tough times, figure out what it is. And again, you look at a company, and is that job in a revenue generating function? During tough times, companies want to keep that revenue going. Is it in a growth area, or is it in an area that's a mature product? Yeah, mature product companies are likely to kind of slash those areas. Is it in a group that is critical for that company's 3 to 5 year strategy? Because if you lose a year or two in your 3 to 5 year strategy, you're behind the competition. However, if you're joining a company and that payoff for that group is like in 10 years out, yeah, companies going to cut that a little bit. You just saw that in the news. What did Google do recently? They said hey, everybody in our think tank group, go find another job except for these 3 or 4 projects. And so it's really getting into, when things hit turbulent times, when you put the crystal ball, it's really leaning into the details. And that's what we're here for, to help with students and help them strategize. Because for some students, this may be the first time they're actually facing a recession. Whereas, some of us have been through maybe 1 or 2, and the clues are all in the history. If you look back at the different types of recessions, you can actually see what groups were hiring, what wasn't, and so forth.
Right. So whether we're describing them as turbulent times or uncertain times, do you find, Heather, that recruiters are always looking for top talent, and the fact that at Ross, for example, you've got the MAP program that's embedded in the experience, and they're saying, yeah, I mean, that's exactly the sort of skills, the adaptability, thinking on your feet that we'll need in these turbulent times?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we hear from our recruiters too when they describe our students, is the adaptability, the ability to work up and down an organization, to kind of roll up your sleeves and get the job done. That's how they describe our Ross students. And our MAP program, the multidisciplinary action projects, is a big part of making that happen for our students. So those projects are a required consulting project that happens at the end of the first year for 6 weeks, consulting projects for all different types of companies all over the globe. And you're thrown into a situation with a company and asked to help solve one of their problems. And you're leveraging everything that you just learned in your core courses. And you're getting support from a couple of faculty, a communications consultant, an MBA too, who went through it the year before. And when you're put in those kind of situations, you're forced to work with a bunch of students from different backgrounds. You're having to learn how to communicate with different people who have different strengths, And you're having to really kind of dig in and develop those agile kind of muscles. And those are exactly what companies are looking for in these kind of times, are people who can jump into any kind of a situation and figure it out, come up with solutions. So that's one of the great strengths, I think, of our program, is how we develop that in students.
So your colleagues at Fuqua, Ed, have done this great job, asking 25 random things about the applicant and bring in another outstanding class, the potential that they've seen in them. You've heard me say in the past, the esteem that I hold for the career services teams at business school, I just see all of you as the kind of the magic source beyond the strategy professors and the cool marketing course that you could have taken. How does it work? How does it work as you bring in this diverse group from all over the world and then provide this extraordinarily personal guidance, support, holding up a mirror? Talk us through sort of careers at Fuqua and how you're guiding them through this exploration and experience.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say some of the themes I'm going to touch on are very similar to what Heather mentioned before, where the day you're admitted, you start getting resources where you can start thinking through what your options look like, as well as start getting ready for all of the nuts and bolts of recruiting, to all the way to you arriving on campus and us trying to put students in a position where they are ready now to recruit, regardless of the different industries that they're recruiting for. So as Heather mentioned as well, as the spectrum has been getting wider and wider, faculty may not love this, but this recruiting process has been getting stretched out as well. We're no longer in the days where arbitrarily there's just a 2-month period where all the internship happens, recruiting happens, and we're done. It's more stretched out. So it's put us in a position to both front load to make people ready early, as well as to provide, call it, support services throughout the year, so that we can deliver all that personalized and custom career service that we are honestly striving to do for all of our different students. And then it becomes a math problem, right? We have, around 1,000 daytime MBA students. I don't have 1,000 coaches, right? So it's not going to work. It's not going to be perfectly one-on-one. So I need to be very strategic in how we're giving the students both what they need and when they need it, as well as to make sure they feel and are supported literally when they need any help. So a lot of our curriculum, I would argue, is probably not very different from what a lot of our counterparts are doing. The things that we're trying to do is make sure that they are as capable and confident as possible early in the process, because I don't know when they're going to be jumping on that moving sidewalk called recruiting for their particular industry. So that's in a nutshell what we do here at Fuqua.
Got it. Now, we might talk about faculty hires. We've got this specialist in AI that comes from Carnegie Mellon. But Abigail, when you're recruiting for your team, what are the qualities that you're looking for in your colleagues to be able to provide so much insight, empathy, as those sort of anxious moments that they go through? What are those qualities? And then perhaps beyond that, the additional tools that they're then working with for assessment and really giving this 360-degree view of the individual?
No, absolutely. It depends on what the role is the first answer. I think that there are very different qualities that I look for on our employer team and on our coaching team. Our coaching team is the part of our office that works the most closely with students. And you mentioned empathy. That's huge. For us, it's really a combination of industry experience and coaching experience. And that I look at it as overall, holistically, like across our team, how are we balancing that out? Because sometimes we find someone who has both in a really perfect package. And sometimes we find someone who has really deep industry experience, but has never coached before, but is open and is coachable and really wants to learn and has a lot to bring to the table. And other times we find people who have done amazing coaching, but don't have all of that industry experience. And so I really look to have our team across the board balanced. And I look at it as, how are we really all contributing and growing to support our students? Our coaching team is actually industry agnostic because by design. And I strongly believe that what makes a coach most effective with someone is their personal relationship and interaction. There are some students who respond very well to someone who is very direct and to the point. There are other students who really want someone to be very slow and patient and hold their hand through every step. And there are people who are in the middle. And so we often will refer students to each other because that's where they're going to actually thrive the most. And it is where they're going to be able to figure out how they can be the best and how they can really bring out the best in themselves and perform the best. So I think it really varies depending also on the opening and what we've just, if someone's left, what's the hole that we're looking for can also influence what we're particularly focused on in any given search. You asked about assessments and what we use. There are a lot of informal tools that we use, but we also do use Clifton Strengths Finders, as well as we do a series of workshops based on designing your life that are really about designing your career. And so those, in very different ways, really contribute to the conversations and the coaching conversations. And for both of them, a lot of it is students get a lot out of both of those processes, but I'd say they get the most out of then continuously applying what they've learned as they work with their coach and continue.
Right. And if employers talk about, we want these analytical skills, we live in a world of big data, how do you and your colleagues then hone the softer skills, which would include, I guess, in the whole careers process, interviewing, networking, and just their communication skills?
Yeah, so we have this term that we use that kind of grounds what we do. It's literally like manage yourself before you manage others, lead yourself before you lead others. And that's where we try to put our effort in. We actually reframed the whole career process around leadership development, because in the end, leadership development, career development, personal development, it's all the same skills, which is why I think most of us have coaches and moved away from an advisory model. We want them to develop. So when I think about networking, when I think about students networking, and we actually try to call it career conversations because we want to remove the transactional value away from it because it feels icky, right? And so we want to move that away. So we call it have a career conversation. That's the nature of it, conversations in exchange. But when you have that networking, you have that exchange, and you tell your story about why you're interested, what you want to do, and then that person, that alumni or that person that you just met volunteers to help you, to say, hey, great, who can I connect you in my network? How can I help you? I see that as a small act of leadership, because that person is under no obligation to do anything for you. But you inspiring them by your story, what you want to do, what you want to do, where do you want to go in the future, how you want to impact the world, that inspires the person to make an offer to say, hey, how can I help you? That's a true act of leading and following, right? So that's an example of what we try to do, is reframe all of the career skills around soft skills. So we lean heavily in getting them connected to our network, because I think every school understands that the network is the most important thing for the student. One of the things that we do here is that in their first week, we encourage everyone, literally the first day before they even start class, we have this career launch workshop, and we get them, we talk about how to introduce themselves. And then at the very end, this is great, your homework assignment is to reach out to one second year and reach out to one alumni in the next month or so to get them started on that. We help them develop, this idea of leading themselves is, sussing out why they want to do something and what's the motivation, what's the goal. A lot of times students come in and they're kind of got this individual contributor mindset, and they kind of want to lean into that job search as an individual contributor, where they like, here's all my data, here's all my experiences, and I hope you figure me out. They just throw all this data out, and they're asking the recruiter or the hiring manager, pull out what you need to pull out from there and figure me out. And we're trying to reverse that process to say, present yourself as what a leader would do. So there's a lot of that. We have one of the things we're experimenting is, again, to help with soft skills and stuff like that, is group coaching, where we bring them in together so they're helping each other, learning how to work. And so all these things kind of play into helping them develop their soft skills. In addition to the normal classes that we have in the other programs, we have diversity, we have discussions on race, all these kind of things that really help shape the students to be able to navigate a much more complex world, much more diverse world. We have lead comms, leading people, again, very similar to, I think, a lot of other programs. But it's really the students interacting with a lot of the diversity and a lot of people coming from different countries is really what's going to help them build up their skills. And we have teams at Haas, and if they hit a problem, we're here as coaches to help them with that too, to help them understand how to navigate those conflicts.
Well, you have students. I have 4 kids at home, and this idea of manage yourselves before you manage others is something that I might try at the dinner table this evening. Yeah. So thank you for that. Hoyt, I guess, is also talking about networks, and Heather, that makes me think of alumni and this extraordinary network that anyone at your 4 schools would then join. great loyalty, proactivity. So talk a little bit about how alumni then can contribute. Perhaps they come and talk about a particular industry, or of course, doors that they can open. What role will alumni play?
Yeah. So Ross has a great alumni network of over 55,000. And then of course, the University of Michigan network, over 650,000. So it's a great alumni network, very committed, very responsive. I think we were ranked the most helpful a while ago. So when you reach out to alumni, they definitely reach back. Whenever we email alumni, we always end it with a go blue, and that always gets a response. So the way our alumni engage, I think the biggest one, maybe the most obvious one, is through recruiting. So when our alumni go to work somewhere, of course, they end up being on the recruiting team or being the recruiting captain. So that's kind of the most obvious one that starts the kind of circle of involvement. And then we involve our alumni in all of our career panels when we are bringing in the new class and getting them to help understand all the different types of roles. So it's a great way for students to hear what that first or second job is like right after school. And then it also helps them get connected to start that conversation with recent alumni. We leverage our alumni too for our career treks that we help run during Week of Professional Development. Our alumni also help with some of our early career prep. As we were talking about, that career prep is getting earlier and earlier. And so we ask them to help with some of our early prep over the summer too, just to help educate our students on what are these roles like, what is the industry like, what are they seeing happen in the world right now. We have an alumni in residence program where alumni come to campus, or we do it virtually also, and students get a career chat with a very senior alum to help learn kind of what has your career trajectory been like. And then we also have a great service for all of our alumni. So they get free career coaching for life and free executive education. So that's just some of the ways. And then our alumni also sponsor our MAP projects. So it's a great way they give back.
Right, with 55,000 of them, you'd filled about half of that big stadium of yours.
That's
and presumably often, we've seen it in the hard times of them saying, our company's hiring, but they're often perhaps the first to sort of see the direction that their business is taking, and then feed that information back to you and your colleagues.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so true. It's a great source of information and future of what's happening. So
right,
definitely.
We talk about Team Fuqua, and there was a bit of a Team Fuqua going on at Apple for a while. Tim Cook is still there, though I know he's shortly going to step away. This idea of perhaps putting together a resume book, or recruiters that say, send us 10, 15, 20 resumes. Is that something over time, Ed, that really establishes itself, and recruiters say, this is what we see in your graduates, and that's why we're coming back for more?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of different reasons why a lot of organizations like to hire Fuqua students. I would argue with Fuqua, as well as all these amazing institutions that are on this panel today, these students didn't get into business school without having some pretty amazing chops and technical abilities already, regardless of their backgrounds. And they're probably going to learn a whole bunch while they're in school. So I guess the parity is that the student knows how to solve the problem. They can solve the equation. They can figure out the technicals. They can figure that out. The reason why I guess they keep coming back for Fuqua talent, at least what I hear, is some people believe that for an organization to continue growing in a very difficult time or in a great time, they need to figure out how to maximize all the resources they have. They need to develop a culture where everybody is valued regardless of where they come from. And when I tell our students on their very first day, as well as organizations that are looking to recruit at Fuqua, there's not going to be another bubble on this planet where you're going to have a more diverse set of amazing big brains that are all devoted in helping everybody around them be better. And that's something that's valuable in a great economy. That's something that's valuable in a terrible economy. But that's one of the reasons why companies keep on coming back, and our students are happy. It's a weird thing. So we did this random survey with a lot of our alumni about what they value, what they would recommend. And one of the things that both employers were saying about our alumni and our alumni were saying about their experiences with Fuqua is that they're just happy people. And so that sounds incredibly soft, but I will make an argument. If you have a team of 5 people, you want to have that happy person on your team. There's something about keeping the team positive mojo going, solving the right problem and having a good time. I don't know about you all, but if I could actually have the right answer and enjoy doing it, I want both. I want both. So that's one of the things, another one of the things of what the employees are talking about our graduates.
Yeah, well, I would instantly hold up a mirror to the energy, the joy, the enthusiasm that you bring to this discussion, but I know exactly what you're describing. And happiness, though sometimes difficult to define, you know it when you see it and what it brings to all of us. Abigail, it's a very mobile group as well. How has that sort of changed over the last 2.5 years with the pandemic? I mean, you've got New York on your doorstep. It's a train ride away to Boston. But now, of course, through Zoom, people could be looking at job offers in Dubai or in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Is that something that you think will sort of be a legacy of the last 2 years and people looking, you know, way beyond immediate geographic boundaries?
Well, I think our students were looking beyond just sort of Boston, New York before. And we actually had a significant number of students doing virtual recruiting before the pandemic for those reasons. And then they'd often travel just for, you know, final decision making sometimes.
Right.
I think that that's even what's become more flexible is students' openness to realize, oh, I could be somewhere and there are opportunities to work for an organization that has remote positions. So if, you know, if a student does have a reason that they want to work in one location, usually it needs to be in the same country, but it depends on that. But if there's somewhere else that they want to live for other reasons, there are more opportunities to do that. And I think just having that flexibility. But I think the bigger piece that's come out of this is just having students realize all the different criteria when you're looking and choosing something. And, you know, how big a role does location play? How big a role does flexibility of location play? And all these other pieces. Whereas, you know, I think that's the more important piece as we work with students and figure out really how are they going to thrive in what kind of situation, that it's just added more questions that they can really explore to really learn about where they want to start.
Right, right. And now that Ed has introduced the theme, happy students at Yale?
Yes, and I think that really one of the things that that we see that sets our students apart as people is Yale talks about our mission all the time. And on the one hand, I would say many schools have missions that are in some ways similar, but educating students for business and society is ingrained in every single department, every single class, everywhere across the school. And that's what the students are also bringing, that sense of contribution, that sense of really, how are they impacting? What's the impact they're making? And you can see that in their academics, you can see that in even how they approach their career search. And so I personally think when people have that sense of contribution, it does really show up in how happy they are and really that sense of purpose that they have.
Right. Well, perhaps that's the new index rather than business school rankings that we should be looking at. Difficult one to measure, but again, you know it when you see it. Picking up on something, Hoyt, that Heather had introduced. You know, often this understandable focus on the first position coming out of business school.
Yeah.
But you know, you were talking about students that have conversations. That's a two-way discussion that includes a lot of listening skills. So how do you also then ensure that they're always listening, and perhaps a conversation they've had now may come back 4 years from now, and everything that you do with your team, not just to prepare them for that first position, but prepare them for the rest of their career?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with how we actually, students learn for active listening. So we have teams at Haas where it happens in their first year, where they have coaches that specifically help them understand how to work as a team. And part of that is actually understanding how to active listening. When they actually meet, a lot of times it's simple modeling. When they meet with us in our sessions with coaches are practicing active listening. And so a lot of times when you learn a new skill, it's just not about learning the skill, but actually understanding the impact on you. When you can feel the impact of that technique on you. So when our students come in and we're practicing active listening, and they feel seen and heard, they actually understand the value when they practice it to others. And that's super important. You need sort of adult learning to get that calibration, because you learn it and you're like, oh, that sounds silly. Anything new is going to sound silly. But when they actually feel the impact, like, oh wait, no, that's what that coach just did for me, and so I should do it for others, right? So that creates a motivation. And I think a lot of the group nature of our classes and our discussions and the social events, that's super important, helps with that. understanding how to listen and be present for others. So that's a really good key part in any student's development. I think the other thing that we have is encouraging continuous conversations with people. There's this notion that we have is that every so often, one should update themselves about themselves. It's this meta notion, right? Because as human beings, we rarely do that, right? We go on, we get caught up in momentum, we're caught up in a career. And one of the benefits of the team that I have is that we coach across all programs. So coaches can actually see different phases of the journey because we're coaching full-timers, we're coaching evening, weekend, we're also coaching alumni and MBAs, executive MBAs. And so we have these snapshots, so we get this picture of what goes on. And so it's important to update yourself about yourself, because as every student grows through their career, and we have a heavy emphasis on supporting them post Haas to make sure we're available, the more information they get, the more experiences they get, they change. And so your goals might change, and the things that matter to you might change. You hear this a lot commonly, right? When people have their first child, their worldview changes. They worry about different things. So we do outreach to our alumni. We encourage students to come back in. We actually have a program where 1 year out, we're inviting them back in. We're launching it called "Is This Job Still Right for You?" Right? And this came out of just appointments we used to put on, like when students would graduate. I'm not sure about this job. Well, great. I'm going to put something in your calendar. 1 year from now, we're going to check in and see how you're doing. And it's on your calendar. Literally, it's titled, "Is this job still right for you?" If it's a yes, you don't need to check in. If it's a no, hey, or you're little, come in. And that's how we help them continue the conversation around them. Because I think what every student wants when they go to an MBA program, what I feel is what they really want to come out of it is career self-efficacy, this ability to manage their career whenever they want to. And that's in the end what I see our mission is in terms of teaching those students how to have career self-efficacy. You have control of your career, and these are the skills. Because I think anybody in the world wants to be able to transform themselves when they want to or need to for the things they want to do. And I think that's something of great value that we add as an MBA program.
We might want to do that, but I think it requires the sort of guidance and support that all of you bring to be able to successfully take that step. And we talk about a changing worldview. Heather, between year 1 and year 2, there's typically a summer internship. Now, in approaching that would be an opportunity for some to pivot, to explore, look at a new industry, possible new roles. So how do you prepare them for that? And then when they get back, which I imagine, you've just had an update of gigantic proportions from hundreds of individuals. So talk us through, the potential positive impact of the summer internship.
Yeah, so before our students go on their internship, we always talk about how to make a good first impression, how to be sure you're networking. So we kind of provide them with all those skills to make sure they're getting there, landing, and being ready to take advantage of all of that. But I think more important than that, because I think that's already top of mind. I mean, they've all had jobs before, they kind of know how to do that. So we're just kind of saying, hey, you stepped out of the workplace to do all this academic stuff. Now let's just remind you of all of that. But more important than that is what happens kind of a few weeks into the internship, and it's kind of a check-in of how are things going, and is this tracking to what you thought it would be? Is this matching to your career goals, or is this a, oh my gosh, what have I done to myself moment, and how am I going to pivot now to re-recruiting? So we usually do a webinar in the summer about re-recruiting. What does that look like? We actually started a new course this past summer, another online course for students to kind of reevaluate, look at a few things, and is this matching with the values I have? Is this matching with my skill set? How do I kind of recalibrate, go back and look at why did I decide to come to business school? How much has that changed? Is this in alignment with my career goals? And kind of pausing and taking a moment to say, is this kind of my true north still, or have I learned so much now that I do need to make another pivot? And that's fine. I think that's what's the biggest challenge for students in an MBA program. Things are happening so fast. There's so much around you. And to find that right moment, like on the balance beam, to be like, okay, I need to step off and jump to another apparatus, or I need to stay on and stay true. I used to be a gymnast, so this is a very familiar metaphor for me. Or do I need to stay on and figure out how to make this work for me? And or do I need to truly kind of jump off and and start gathering myself and doing the right things to be successful somewhere else. And what I find is students that go to a top MBA program are very committed, very motivated. Sometimes it's really hard to say, I'm out of here. I'm going to do a great dismount, get my score and leave. And that can be really hard because it can be a little overwhelming to think about how you retool yourself. But what we try and remind them is we've set you up for great success, because remember, before you even set foot on campus, we put you through this amazing course to help you get all these great skills and prepare you. And now we've got this other great course to help you kind of re-recruit and to make sure you're getting set on the right path. So, fortunately in this past year, a lot of companies came back to do more full-time hiring. I mean, the consulting firms were coming back February, March, April, last spring to do more hiring. So like we've said a few times already, the opportunities were great. So that always lends itself to an easy pivot post-internship if that wasn't going the right way. But, the other thing I wanted to mention as I've been listening to everybody is the one element that I think students often forget is themselves and their own ability to make this happen. And, students look at all the spreadsheets, they look at the numbers, they look at, this person did that. But these students are amazing and they have done so much. And the biggest thing that we can help remind them is, look how far you've gotten so far. You can do this. And so remembering that you have the ability within you to make this happen and to remind them to do that. And while you're here at school, get outside your comfort zone and take risks, because when you do that, you find a level of capability and self-confidence that you probably never thought you had. And that's going to lead you into the future with a much stronger job satisfaction and life satisfaction.
Yeah, finding that voice and that confidence. Now, my final question for you, Ed, you could give me a one-word answer, but I know how thoughtful and thought-provoking you are, so I expect more. Whether it was in the dot-com bubble, through the financial crisis, the challenges and upheaval of the last couple of years, fundamentally, with everything that you've observed, the talent that comes through Fuqua, would you say that you're better off with an MBA from a top school than without one?
Matt, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to take not being able to give a one-word answer, but I would say absolutely better off coming from a top school, coming from a place like Fuqua. It's about optionality, and the fact of the matter is there's a set of elite schools where a lot of employers, time and time again, they can rely on some amazing talent. So for a lot of different reasons, we have a lot of different flavors of MBA on this call today, but absolutely good time, bad time, getting an MBA from a top school like Fuqua is definitely in the best interest of a student.
And why? If you had to identify one quality in the good times or the bad times?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the schools do a good job of preparing students for two things: to be ready now and to be ready later. The ready now is the technicals that people often focus on the things that they learn in their classes so that they can be effective in that job for the first, call it 6 months. But the reason why companies are coming to these schools like Duke is to find the person that's ready later. And a school like Duke is going to do a really good job to, regardless of the student's background, to be able to elevate what's made them successful so far so that they're ready to accelerate to not just being an individual contributor, but a contributor to the entire team. And that's something that's scalable. This is something that tech companies get really excited about, taking small growth and making it large growth. But that's the accelerator that a place like Duke is going to offer. We're not just thinking about that first job. We're thinking about all of the bigger jobs and the bigger roles that you're going to have at the organization, because we think there's so much that's unlocked for a student that they're able to do after they get their MBA too.
Right. To wrap up, Abigail, and it's been an absolutely fabulous panel. MBAs might focus on a particular job title, a specific role that the one company that they want to work with, rather than the person that they want to be. So where do you and your team fit in that and finding the balance between, yes, roles, but also purpose and sense of self?
I think that certainly most of our students really care about their purpose and sense of self. And sometimes they get lost in the doing of just applying in business school and classes and everything. But at the end of the day, that is so important to them. And I think who you want to be is really what will carry you through the rest of your life. And one of the things that I think, and it's related in some ways to the question you asked, Ed, I think the value of an MBA, and certainly Yale SOM MBA, but I would argue, as Ed did, any really elite MBA, is that we're teaching students and giving them the fluidity and flexibility to learn and grow and ask the questions that will continue to propel them forward. And that's all about being inquisitive and being open to learning. And I really think it's this ongoing learning process of life is really where people find their happiness and find where they're going to thrive and be the most successful. And I don't think one can exist without the other. So really bringing all of that to our students and asking them the questions so they can figure out they're the expert on their life. So our job is to ask them questions to start figuring out what's the next step on the path so they can keep moving forward on it.
Right. Thank you. I've hosted many admissions and careers panels, but to be this excited, just sharing the last 45 minutes with you, talk about, lead yourself before you can lead others, the confidence and the talent within these individuals that Heather was describing, not just being ready now, but being ready later. So I'm going to try and do one thing very quickly, and I don't know if we'll be able to successfully catch it on Zoom. So thank you for your patience, but I'm going to take Heather's gymnastic analogy and hold it. That was the dismount. You guys were just phenomenal. Thank you so much, Hoyt. Thank you, Heather, Ed, Abigail. You're an extraordinary group. I know how hard you've all worked to achieve those amazing results that your students have enjoyed this year, and I applaud you for that. But thanks for being at CentreCourt, sharing so much enthusiasm and insight. We would love to be able to capture your voices, because often it's your colleagues from admissions that are on the road and going to the MBA tours, and yet what you're able to share about this extraordinary experience they're going to go through at your 4 schools is wonderful to capture. So thank you sincerely.